Pokemon has a lot of mechanic changes made every generation, and Gen 9 was certainly not an exception to that fact. Every generation since X and Y has had a unique gimmick, but I won't be talking about those in this video, as those are very understandable to only be kept in 1 or 2 generations at a time. What I will be talking about are the many great features that Pokemon games used to have that Scarlet and Violet just completely ditched. Now that we've had the release of both DLCs and no announcement of any further content, I don't think we should expect any significant features or really any changes at all outside of bug fixes. And even then, who knows if they'll fix the bugs in this game. Before getting into the features I wish Scarlet and Violet had kept from previous games, I do want to point out some of the best features in these games. The open world aspect was such a good change of pace to traditional Pokemon games, and while there's no consistent level scaling between your Pokemon and the Pokemon at gyms, I'm just glad that we no longer have all those BS roadblocks that are obviously just there to stop us from getting to the next gym before defeating a current one. Using Koraidon and Miraidon as rides is awesome, especially with the introduction of the Fly feature in the Indigo Disc DLC, as it is a very efficient way of getting around. Encounters being exclusively in the overworld is awesome too, and something that I think many fans would appreciate if kept that way. You can access your box, change nicknames, delete moves, teach moves, and relearn moves from anywhere. Making Pokemon for competitive battling has also never been easier, as Scarlet and Violet has Nature Mints, Hyper Training, being able to pass egg moves with a Mirror Herb, EXP candies for leveling up, and competitive items being able to be bought with Pokédollars or LP, where some previous games had you collect battle points. I feel like a lot of fans complain that these features made the game too easy, but I don't think being easier is the intention, rather more accessible to discourage hacking. Although, people will still hack the game no matter how easy you make it. Alright, those are just some of my favorite features that Scarlet and Violet either introduced or kept from previous games that I really like. Now, let's move on to what I don't like as much about Scarlet and Violet. Previous games gave us an options menu that allowed us to slightly change parts of the game to be able to play the game the way we wanted. Now, these changes weren't anything crazy, it was merely things like turning off battle animations to save time, or playing on set mode to give more of a challenge. Set mode, by the way, as opposed to switch mode, just means that you won't be given this kind of message in a trainer battle, making it a little more challenging. If you go to the options menu in Scarlet and Violet, you can't do either of these things. Thus, you're forced to play the game with animations on and switch mode on at all times. Speaking of the game forcing you to play a certain way, let's talk about the EXP share. If you've played anything before Gen 6, you'll know where I'm going with this. The EXP share used to be a held item that would evenly distribute the experience points to the holder and any other non-fainted Pokemon that participated in the battle. This item was great for playthroughs, as it completely eliminated the need for switch training, something that was very tedious if the Pokemon you're training is weak, like a Magikarp or something. This could also be used post-game to EV train weaker Pokemon with one of your stronger Pokemon, as the EXP share also passed on EVs earned in battle. Starting in Generation 6 though, this is not how the EXP share works. The EXP share is no longer a held item, but rather a key item that can be turned on and off. When turned on, it distributes the experience earned among not only the Pokemon that participated in the battle, but all other non-fated Pokemon in the party. Pokemon that earn experience will also be awarded with the EVs earned from the battle, including Pokemon that are level 100 that cannot earn any more experience. This was just one of the things that made X and Y, the game this concept was introduced, one of the easiest Pokemon games we've ever seen. At least in these games, you have the option of turning the EXP share off, which is nice, allowing you to make these incredibly easy games a little bit more of a challenge. Starting in Sword and Shield though, they got rid of the EXP share entirely, so experience defaults to being shared and you cannot turn it off. While I wasn't the biggest fan of the key item EXP share, it was still nice that you could turn it off, and if you only had 2 Pokemon in your party, it would function exactly like the old EXP share held item, only it didn't require your Pokemon to hold an item. If I were to rework the EXP share for a new game, I would first bring back the EXP share held item, and then add a section to the options menu of shared experience on or off. This would allow for all forms of shared experience, either the held item version, the key item version, or no shared experience at all. Next, I want to look at some other smaller features that definitely aren't game defining, but would still be nice to have brought back. The Versus Recorder was a key item that was in the game from Gen 4 through 7. It allowed you to save the replay of an online battle as well as some offline trainer battles. This was great for content creators, as this replay skipped any time in between turns that players took to select their move. It was also just neat to have for anyone in case you wanted to maybe save a replay of a cool play you made or a cool team you saw online. Starting in Sword and Shield though, this key item is no longer in the game. The only way to save a replay from a battle at all is either by holding the screenshot button on the Switch, which will only save footage of the last 30 seconds, or have a capture card and already be recording your screen. I don't know how hard this would be to implement from a coding perspective, but Scarlet and Violet should really have some kind of game replay saving. I mentioned earlier that Scarlet and Violet exclusively have overworld encounters, unless maybe you count terror raids and egg hatching as not the overworld, which I think is great. I do think that we should still be able to use some kind of fishing rod though, something that has been available in every game since Generation 2. And probably the most nitpicky feature that I wish was brought back is more customizable outfits. The outfit selection in Scarlet and Violet is pretty lacking even with the DLC, and a game like X and Y had a much wider selection to choose from. Next, I'm going to do a little speed round of features from Legends Arceus that should be brought to main series games. I don't want to spend too much time on this part just because Legends Arceus is such a different style of game compared to anything we've ever seen, and most people wouldn't consider it to be a main series game at all, so it would be a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison. However, there are still plenty of features that I feel could fit in any game. Probably the single best feature in this game is the shiny sound and sparkle effect before encountering a Pokemon in the overworld. Scarlet and Violet did keep overworld shinies, but you only get the shiny sound and sparkle effect once you encounter the Pokemon. This was one of the most satisfying sounds to hear when playing Legends Arceus, and it not only made shinies more exciting, but more accessible, something that I mentioned earlier that should be the intention of new features in games. There's also still no way to release more than one Pokemon at a time unless you use the Pokemon Home Box system. I feel like this really isn't asking for much, and it would make shiny hunting through egg hatching much less tedious since releasing individually takes forever. Speaking of hatching eggs, let's move on from features in Legends Arceus and talk about the Pokémon Day Care. The Day Care is the location in Pokemon games that allows you to breed 2 compatible Pokemon, giving you eggs to hatch. It also levels up your Pokemon slightly, 1 experience point for every step to be exact. In Pokemon Scarlet and Violet though, there is no Day Care. Instead, Pokemon are bred through picnics, just one of the few things that you can do through picnics. Now, picnics as a whole I don't mind. In fact, there are quite a few neat things you can do through picnics. You can make sandwiches that give you temporary power-ups like an increased shiny chance, increased encounter chance, and increased raid drops. You can pass egg moves with a mirror herb like I mentioned earlier. You can give your Pokemon a wash to increase their friendship, which is necessary in some Pokemon evolutions. And overall, it's just a fun and cute way to interact with all your Pokemon in your party at once. I just wish it wasn't the only way of breeding Pokemon. The main problem with picnics is that you can't access your party or box when inside a picnic, which means you can't collect and hatch eggs at the same time. What most people will do when hatching a bunch of eggs is make an egg power sandwich to increase the amount of eggs spawning in the basket, and collect all eggs in the basket for 30 minutes, which is how long the sandwich power-ups last. Then, after closing the picnic, you can access your box to then bring the eggs to your party and hatch them. This is significantly less efficient than previous games, especially since if you're shiny hunting or IV breeding, you'll generally stop once you've gotten your shiny or perfect IV Pokemon. You're not going to keep hatching a whole box worth of eggs just because. And those are some of the features that previous Pokemon games had that Scarlet and Violet should bring back. Or really, just features that never should have been ditched in the first place. Let me know in the comments if you feel that I missed any, or disagree with any of the features I included. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.